This is a Q&A. Again, as we had yesterday, that means that we are going to be here for this 1 hour for you and for your questions. The questions should be around the topic. So we are talking about Montessori for neurodivergent minds. That means children, but also, of course, parents. And first, I will say maybe a few words about Amorette. She's an educator, therapist, speaker, and mother. She's she helps families and neurodivergent children to better understand the way we think and celebrate our differences and focus on our strengths. She's also homeschooling or homeschooled twin girls and a son, while she's also offering consultations and coaching services to schools, families, businesses, and different providers. She wrote several books. The latest book, children's book, is The Puppy in My Head, and it will be in bookstores this year. Am I right?
Yeah, they actually pushed it back to next year, but yeah,
Okay,
I'm
well, then
pretty
you'll have
excited
to
about
wait.
it.
We'll have to wait. What did I forget? Can you tell us a little bit more about you so we know who you are? Tell us something that we don't see in the bio.
Well, I should clarify, I was homeschooled and I homeschool. So my children are
Okay.
second generation homeschoolers. So I have had the privilege of being in their position and also being in what was my mother's position.
That's good. That's nice. That's nice. And that's interesting. Before we have any questions in the chat, we have two questions prepared ahead. The first one is, what if my sensory needs are different than the sensory needs of my child? What can I do about it?
Okay, that's a great question because especially as people find out that their children are neurodivergent, they're finally realizing that they themselves have different sensory needs if they also aren't neurodivergent themselves. So what I always recommend is compiling the needs of your whole family, the triggers and glimmers. And for those who aren't aware, glimmers are the exact opposite of triggers. So while triggers are, can bring about frustration, glimmers are calming. They bring peace. So compile, triggers, glimmers, sensory seeking, sensory avoiding, and then assess how we can balance these needs or separate them for the whole family. Let me give you an example. I'm a sensory avoider for the most part. However, one of my children is a hardcore seeker, like think the kind of person who wants to step on Legos. And noise is a big trigger for me, while it's a huge glimmer for her. So we have to find a balance on how to make it so that I'm not being overwhelmed, but she also meets her needs. And because she has these areas of needs, we've created areas that she can meet these needs, and yet I'm also protected. But that doesn't mean that sometimes I don't have to wear noise cancelers or something like that in order to balance, or that she might have to wear something that makes it so that she can listen to like her music, but the rest of the family doesn't have to. So what we do, and just a reminder, it's okay to use tools to give a sense of control. For instance, it's okay. So we have different areas set up. They, in their homeschool room, they have the noisemakers and they stay there. Like the drums, the shaky things, they stay there. And that's okay to have that boundary set because those are accessible to them 24, well, pretty much 24/7. They do sleep, thankfully. And then usually like in my kitchen, where I spend a lot of my time is where it tends to be a little bit quieter or we listen to something that is more soothing to me. So we tend to have these different zones. And another one that I always get asked about is touching, because a lot of us get overwhelmed with sensory touch. Like, you have especially, your infants and your toddlers, they tend to be, have you heard, I don't know if you've heard the term Velcro baby, and I have an amazing little Velcro baby who I absolutely adore. And as my little children and my twins were younger, we have a chair. This is a chair that when I'm sitting in that chair, it means absolutely you don't even need to ask. You can pile upon me. It is okay. It is the rocking chair. But there are times that I'm not sitting in that chair and I have to say, give me a moment. I have to And it is completely okay to honor our own sensory needs. And it's important to, because then our child sees that and sees that, it's okay for us to and say we need to pause. So I don't know if that helped at all or if you need me to be a little bit more clear, but let me know.
I think that is very much fine. Thank you. We have first question from Kathleen. How do we help those who cannot read others' emotions and miss the cues obvious to others in their body language?
Okay, this is a perfect question for me because I'm not sure if you are aware, but I cannot read facial expressions and body language, and it's often missed. So, for instance, my husband, he'll say, are you upset? I'm like, no, I'm actually really happy right now. And he says, your body language isn't expressing it. And oftentimes you hear about how you don't want to, as a parent, you don't want to say to your child, like, you're making me angry right now, or you're making me mad right now. You don't want to say anything like that. But at the same time, we also have to express if you're unable to read that, there has to be a little bit more open communication in regards to it. It can't just be guesswork because I will guess wrong. So we talk about it, but when we talk about miscues or whatever, I try to do it in a way that they're not being blamed. Like I can say, I'm feeling a little frustrated right now, or I'm feeling a little this. And one of the important things when it comes to this is honesty. Because have you ever talked to somebody and you said, "Oh, how are you doing?" They're like, "Oh, I'm okay." And then later it comes out that they're not doing okay. I know as an autistic person, I greatly rely on what people say versus what they do. And it's really difficult because about 70% of communication is facial expression, is body language. So that's how I go about it best, is communicating it, but trying to communicate it in a way that it is not placing blame, but also making sure my children or the children I work with feel comfortable sharing with me. Because if they say, I'm feeling frustrated, and if I come at them, and if it's like, oh, well, you shouldn't be upset, and if we don't validate their emotions, they're less likely to be open with us about how they're feeling and their true feelings. So then we're going to get that, oh, I'm okay. So then if you're in a position that they are similar to me and they don't express their emotions clearly, then it's going to make it even more difficult for you. So that's one of the ways we go about it, is that. And also, when it's difficult to verbalize, we use colors. That's a huge thing. And I wish I had it with me to show you, but we have a board and it has the different colors, and we have like a little string and then clips. And then, for instance, I have a little clip so I can show if I'm in blue, which means I'm more like sad, depressed, feeling down, or if I'm green, which green, yellow, neutral, everything's okay, or if I'm red, angry. So we have these boards and we try to touch base. So that's one of the things, is making it verbally, making it so that if they can't verbalize or aren't comfortable verbalizing it, or aren't can't really quite, because I know that's my problem. I don't know about the rest of you, but like sometimes you're like, I feel something, but I don't know what I feel. I think it's like a purple feeling. Like I think it's kind of mixed with red or blue. Like when someone shared the word bittersweet with me, I'm like, oh, that's perfect. I've never, like the combination of two feelings together. Um, but so then you can have a visual way to do it too. And yeah, did that help at all? I hope that helped.
I hope it did. Kathleen, if you have any, questions that go with it,
Because
your
I
answer
want to make sure
was
I
so
answer it.
helpful. Perfect. So Kathleen answered that it was very helpful.
Okay, good.
Perfect. My another question is about PDA. And if you can tell us a little bit more about this, what it is, because we keep on hearing it a little more and more. So maybe you can start about this before we have other questions to come.
Yes, absolutely. And cut me off whenever you want to. So PDA stands for pathological demand avoidance. However, it's preferred as pervasive drive for, or pervasive demand avoidance, or pervasive drive for autonomy. There's a few variations of it, but essentially, it's a nervous system condition. And while at this time, it is a profile of autism, meaning that you're diagnosed as autistic and then you can go on to receive this PDA. I think very soon we're actually going to see that PDA is going to become a diagnosis on its own. From talks I've been hearing is that it seems very likely because I'm finding that there are also ADHDers who are being diagnosed as PDAers. Because again, it is a nervous system condition. So what that means is your body over the slightest thing goes into fight, flight, or freeze mode, and with demands. And everything is a demand. Brushing your teeth, getting dressed, being here, getting out of bed, changing your clothes, toilet, everything is a demand. And I think just that's one of the things we tend to forget is when we hear about PDA or about demands is we think it's just something like, oh, I have to go to work or I have to, and it's no, there's there. And another important thing that I want to remind people is that when you request your child, or even you may notice this in yourself, when it comes to PDA and demands, when you ask for a task, it's usually not just the task that needs to be done. For instance, if I ask my child to write their name, it's not just writing their name. They have to sit down at a table. They might have had to grab a pen, a paper. They might have to, so you have a ton of tiny little demands in this one larger task. So that's another important thing to remember. But when it comes to they get in this because I have been diagnosed, we get in this fight, fight, freeze, and it's so it often comes out in anger. So while it's anxiety, it comes out in anger a lot of the times. And then you start to notice things like equalizing behaviors, where they're just frustration and you feel like you're drowning and you just try. And it's really challenging it's really challenging to experience it, but it's especially really challenging to understand on how to parent or a child because you have to you don't even understand, like you don't even realize that something is, it sets you off and you don't really realize it.
Thank you. Can I ask you other questions from the chat, or do
Oh,
you
yes,
want
of
one?
course.
There was a question from Amina. We have a 5-year-old child on the autism spectrum in our Montessori preschool who was very reserved last year, but has made great progress in language and working with materials. This year, he wants to play with peers, but expresses it by hitting or pushing instead of using words. When we approach him after he hits, he starts crying. How can we support him in developing positive social interactions while also helping him regulate his emotions in these moments?
Ooh, I'm gonna give two different ways. One, stories. Stories is fantastic to be able to read and go back and say, do you remember when Brother Bear, had a difficult time doing that? Do you remember like bringing it back where they're removed? But also you can also use them as an example if they've experienced it. We do that quite a bit. For instance, do you remember yesterday when your sister pushed you? How did you feel? How did you feel when that happened? How do you think this person feels? So you can use either stories if it hasn't occurred to them or using the examples because a lot of us autistics tend to be Gestalt language processors, which means everybody, we learn by chunks, but we also come to understand things through experiences. I mean, most people do, but it's a little bit slightly different for language Gestalt processors. So I always use examples in order to make that connection so that he has that connection. Another thing is, as you said that he cries, poor little thing. I would recommend, is he able to communicate after? Is he able to communicate? Because I would almost wonder if there's a way that he can, sorry, I'm gonna reread it really quick. I don't know if he's able to communicate or whatever, but we tend to experience a great deal of empathy. A lot of people think autistics can't feel empathy, and that's quite the opposite. Sometimes we feel it extremely deeply. And I wonder if he just realizes, he reacts because, you get overwhelmed, you get excited and you react. And I wonder if he just doesn't understand, but then after it's pointed out, like, oh, you're being too rough, or oh, you hurt this, and then he feels extremely deeply that he's caused harm. Sorry, I went to scroll down to see if they had any more information, but those would be my two huge things is the using examples, whether through personal or through like, TV shows or books or, something like that where they can make some form of a connection and then bring it in so that they can go, okay, oh, this makes sense to me.
Thank you. We are from Katarina. We are homeschooling our son with PAD. How to build a trustful working process.
Whew, I'm assuming it's PDA, and
Mhm.
that's a lot. A lot comes into it. For instance, did they previously go to school? Because if they went to school, do they need to de-school before they can homeschool? And for those who aren't familiar, we do a lot of unschooling in Montessori. So you have like your traditional school where you can also have like, Montessori or like a public school or whatever. And then you have unschooling, which means or when you do homeschooling, you can follow a curriculum that, there's a curriculum written that you just pretty much follow. You can unschool, which is what we do, which means there's no curriculum, but we follow the needs of the child. For instance, here we are reading a lot of American Girl books, and then we use that to dive into the history or dive into math or dive into, use that by following the child. And then there's deschooling, and unschooling usually gets mixed up with the deschooling. And deschooling is where there's nothing. It's a child needs to regulate, and this is usually very common for neurodivergent children after attending public schools with a rigid structure. They need to kind of just take a vacation in a sense. Um, so I'm wondering, that's one of the things I'm wondering is, did your child previously go to a traditional school? Because that's one of the things that you're going to have to work on is that, and I'm going, why? Explain the why. Whys and consistency are two of the hugest things for PDAers. And I use this example all the time, and I will continue using it. Stop signs and traffic lights, red traffic lights. We stop at them. We stop at them. And with as many PDAers are in this world, there's not as many accidents as there could be because we stop at them. And the reason we do that is because it's consistent because of what it means and because there's a reason for it. We know the why behind it. So that's one of the things. So that's what I would recommend, consistency, and explain the why. And if you want more in depth, feel free to ask more. But I'm hoping that kind of is start of the process and make sure that meet the emotional break needs. Give plenty of time to break because another thing is I don't know if how long you've been homeschooling. I don't know if you've been doing it for 20 years but the homeschooling should not look like a traditional schooling environment. So that's the awesome thing about homeschooling.
Thank you. Question from Melinda. I have a child who pretty much looks like a mild autistic. He's progressing with the class routine, but however, he still wants to be the first in everything and likes to go over other children instead of using his words. And I also find he has language trouble, which he is not able to express with words.
Okay, so one of my questions is because you talked about language trouble and not being able to express this with words, and if you think he might be autistic, again, Gestalt language processing is a huge thing with autistics, and the words I don't know if this is a case because it says language trouble and not always able to express words. So I don't know if it's necessarily like a word doesn't mean the same to him that it does to you, or if it's difficulty with language in general. But I want to touch on both. So, words do not always mean the same thing to us that they do to you, in traditional terminology. And I used an example. I was with a child and I said, I will do something once I am finished here. And they got really upset. And it's the word finished, even though the terminology, and I used it in the right thing, that wasn't the correct word. They had already tacked that word finished to something else. And it probably, due to the emotion, it probably wasn't a very positive thing. So I said, once I am done, and that was okay. So that could be one of the things. And another thing is not able to express with words. When is he not able to express with words? Because as someone who has speech of apraxia or apraxia of speech, there are times that I am unable to communicate. It's like the whole communication. I can't sign, I can't do anything. I'm going to be honest, I get really nervous doing these because it can cause that. But I wonder if maybe if it's something where he's not able to communicate at times, if maybe he might experience something different. And I would highly recommend some type of an AAC, whether it be signing, which technically isn't a form of AAC depending on who you speak to, but sign language. And again, if he has something similar as I do, you can't, it doesn't always work. The whole language at all doesn't, communication doesn't work at all. Or giving like maybe a board that allows him to point out certain needs, or we used a watch that had certain, allowed it to speak, because you can, with AAC, you have low tech, like I said, such as a board or a printout, or the high tech where you have like an iPad or something. And the thing is that I wonder if something like that would be beneficial. And I'm seeing the beginning, he's progressing with the class routine. I would try that, give him more opportunity to use, to be able to communicate. Because sometimes I know for myself, sometimes I'm just like, screaming in my head. And also, yeah, I would try to work on that, the words thing first, making sure that he can communicate, and then start working on the classroom routine. With the classroom routine, you might have to have a guide, be more present, be more focused, just one-on-one work with them. Like, oh, let's go behind this person. Let's give somebody else a turn, and also explain why, or maybe again, use a story to help explain why. And I'm gonna be honest, you hear a lot about it, but that Bluey show, and they have books. They're awesome. They have like they're really fantastic. Something like that where it's really fantastic and you can go, "Oh, do you remember when so and so did?" I would try, like I said, language, and then try working one-on-one with a guide to do a little bit more, but make sure he can communicate first when he needs to. And if you don't mind, can I go up to a question I saw?
Yes.
How do caregivers respond to an infant's emotional needs or discomfort? And I just want to touch on that really quick because, we talk about neurodivergence and things like that. And, I always tell people an autistic child grows up to be an autistic adult, and you're autistic or, ADHD or whatever at birth, and that depends on there. So, I think it's really important that we touch on that too, for how do caregivers respond to an infant's emotional needs or discomfort. Validate them, and then help them, help them with what it is. For instance, I have a 9-month-old, and when there's express, we say, "Oh, I see you're feeling upset." We help name their feelings. "I see you're frustrated. I see you're really angry. Oh, let's check your nappy. Is your nappy wet? Are you feeling hungry?" So it's really important that we start to do that and start to give names to these emotions and make them feel comfortable communicating and make it such a norm. Because if we don't really start at birth, which I love about Montessori, is that everything is respecting the child and beginning at birth. Because when do we begin? Do we wait until they're teenagers and they don't have that foundation with us? Or so I just thought it was really important to kind of touch on that, because it's especially with neurodivergent people and emotional, and it's so overwhelming that it's so important that we touch on that and start doing it, from the very beginning. So I hope that was helpful, whoever asked that question.
Thank you. Question from Noah. But no kids like to do the tasks that are asked for when they are toddlers. How do you know if it's age appropriate or PDA?
That is a fantastic question. And I'm trying to think of whether I want to use a school example or a practical skills example. And honestly, you can go about it either way, because even though PDA, strong-willed children, I don't really care for that term. Spirited children, children who just in general have a strong drive for autonomy, like toddlers, because they're starting to get that sense. Hence why we hear no all the time, because they're starting to get that sense of self. We can use the exact same tasks. So, uh, but no kids like to do the task. You don't always know. You don't always know. Um, and that's kind of the challenging thing. And that's why when I kind of feel sometimes when I share something, and I'll share as an autistic person, or, speak to people with autistic children, people think that the tips I share are just for autistic. No, it's for children in general. It's for children in general. So no, you may not know exactly why. Um, or if which one it is, but the like so far everything that I've shared should be applicable to regardless of if it's one or the other.
Thank you. There was another question from Amina that had a plus sign, so probably another person liked it.
Well, you look for that one. Someone asked if neurodivergence is considered a disability. Yes. Like autism is considered a disability, and disability is not a bad, it's not a bad word.
From Amina, how can a mother diagnosed with ADHD effectively manage both her work and parenting, especially when raising a neurodivergent child? Are there specific Montessori strategies that can help with organization, routines, and emotional regulation for both the parent and the child?
Okay. So it's really, really hard, especially because routine and most children thrive with routine. I don't know. You don't say what your child's neurotype is exactly, uh, but I can help. I can kind of assist with the ADHD. So I'm just gonna, whether it's you or them. So one of the things is with ADHDers, we are looking for dopamine. We are constantly looking for dopamine. Hence why, and this PDA is the same thing. Nuances, like a little bit different, like little bit different things. So for instance, like when I work with my children and we're trying to learn something, I switch it up and like we're fractions, we're doing pies, or I have to call in and tell them a pie that I like to order. Like different nuances are really important. So when you're talking about organizing and routine, what are prioritize? That's what I should say. Prioritize. What are the most important things and the absolute that you have to do? Um, I know what ours are here, and we try to, with especially ADHDers, it is not. So I'm going to give you two things, and it's kind of going to go against each other. It's not always ideal to to list every little thing. Does that make sense? But at the same time, if you are writing something down to meet a dopamine to be able to cross something off, it might be helpful. Let me give you an example. So say your child or you has to clean a room. You have to clean your bedroom. And you can, in your head, you say, I have to clean my bedroom. Undoubtedly, you're going to get sidetracked. You're going to do other things. And there's a ton of tips that you can do for doing certain things. But one of the things that you can do too is if you write lists, is you can make as detailed lists. And each time you check something off, that is like a little dopamine hit. It makes you rejoice a little bit. So that's one of the important things to learn about yourself too, is which one benefits you more? Is it something where keep something vague so that you don't feel overwhelmed, or you can kind of keep with nuances with it? Or do you need something where you need those tiny little dopamine hits? So that's one of the important things for coming up with strategies to help with organization and routines. Another thing is have a have like a choices. Don't make it where, okay, exactly at 9 o'clock I have to do this. Exactly at 10 o'clock I have to do this. No, say, you know what, I have to do some kind of a chore. I can either unload the dishwasher, I can do the dishes, or I can do this. Like try to make it so that you have this time blocking can be really helpful, because then it can help narrow in, but also realize it's really important to find out what your strengths and weaknesses are. For instance, are video games. Video games can be really helpful for some neurodivergent people because it can, offer a calm and peaceful, but then only certain ones are actually helpful for ADHDers, because otherwise you get too into it and you can't take yourself away. So one of the most important things that you can do for yourself is kind of figuring out these things. Like I said, does this work better or does this work? And does this work better or does this work? So I'm not sure if that was helpful at all. Let me know if you wanted a little bit, because you said managing both work and parenting. So I tried to cover a little bit, some things that could help for both. But if you need a little bit more clarification, absolutely ask more. But I just kind of went on a tangent. So let me know if you need a little bit more clarification. Sorry if I took a little bit long.
That's very much fine. I think everyone appreciates you going even longer. From Rita, how can I recognize Gestalt processing in a child? My son is 2 years old and has many relatives with autism, so we all expect him to also be neurodivergent.
chunk learning. So instead of learning play, and a lot of it is almost like an echolalia, where so it's not, again, I'd recommend going to, I would always recommend finding a specialist, someone who is neurodivergent affirming. But if you're looking for, looking for something that might kind of, be like, oh, maybe I should go, is chunks where like play doesn't make sense, but let's go play, or where everything comes in chunks. Does that make sense? That it's not single things don't make sense, it's chunks. And that's how we gather the experience to be able to make that connection. I hope that was helpful.
Rita says, yes, thank you.
Okay.
From Amina again. Do you have a structured way or a table of key observations to help identify and understand neurodivergent traits in children from 0 to 3 and 3 to 6 years in a Montessori setting? For example, specific behaviors to observe or guiding questions to ask.
No. And I'm going to tell you it's going to be really difficult because a lot of the traits that you have, a lot of the traits that you see for that could be autistic are also standard, either sensory during the certain sensory period or the schemas. For instance, rotation, the rotational schema, having things go round and round. That is a completely atypical. I don't like a lot of the normal or whatever. It's normal child development. However, it comes down to when we look at something like autism, it comes down to frequency and occurrence. So we always give an example. And so everybody uses the restroom, right? However, if you are using the restroom like every 2 minutes, then we can say that that's a little bit different, right? Then we can kind of look into it. So that's what it comes down to is a lot of the autism traits are completely normal. Most children will experience them because it's normal childhood development. It just comes down to the frequency and the occurrences. So I'm not sure if that helps at all. But but yeah, that was one of the spinning and things like that is a normal trains, completely normal. So was that helpful at all? And I'm sorry, it's probably not
Yeah.
exactly what you wanted to hear.
I think it's fine. From Hazin, we have one child who is 2.5 years old. He knows 3 to 4 words. He understands everything when he is told. What is a good way to make him more active so he can speak more words? And do you think all speech delay is type of autism?
Absolutely not all speech delay is a form of autism. It's just the way it is. I've worked with a lot of children who have speech delays and they're not autistic at all. But I think it's so important to make sure that children have a way to communicate. So sorry, I'm going to go off a tangent a little bit. I'm huge into AAC because a lot of people go, oh, I know that'll stop my child from talking, or no, it'll prevent my child from learning a language, like learning to verbalize. That is not the case. Studies have found that's not the case. And not only that, but we scaffold. We are huge into scaffolding in Montessori, okay? We do not expect a child to, for the first time of putting on a coat, zip it up and button it up and everything's going to be great. No, no, no. What do we do first? We give them a dressing frame. We allow them to practice and work on a singular a skill independently so that later they can take these little steps and add them up and we scaffold it until it's a bigger task, right? It's the same thing with children who can't verbalize. If they are unable to, we make it so that they can, whether that be like with an AAC, this is my opinion, with an AAC device or something so that they are able to verbalize and get across. And over time, because I've seen it many, many times, over time, they might not need the full thing. So for instance, worked with a kid, needed like a high-tech AAC during situations where there was a lot of people around. They had a hard time communicating when there was people. Everyone wrote it off as shy. They weren't shy. They had things they wanted to say. It was just that, that apraxia of speech comes over and it's really difficult. Get them an AAC device. They were able to communicate. In time, it moved from the high-tech AAC to where they just had a few things that they need, a few phrases that they could just point to if needed. In time, it got to the point that they didn't need anything at all. So that's one of the important things that I want to share when it comes to speaking and everything is is don't be scared to use something, because it could be just a scaffolding thing that's necessary to scaffold a skill, if that makes sense. He understands everything that he is told. So that's, oh, sorry. So that's what I would do is make it so that he has ways to communicate. And then because we do the normal, because we do all the things, we read the books. And then when we do things, we, up and out and use different words because, and as I explained earlier, sometimes a word doesn't mean the same thing. And we have to find something. And I'll use the pink tower, for example. You might use, little, big, right? But maybe it needs to be large, small. They mean the exact same thing, but one word just clicks better. It's kind of like when you meet someone and they say their name and you're like, oh, well, you don't really look like. It's kind of like that. It just doesn't click. It just doesn't seem right. So we don't use that word. So I'm wondering if that could also be some of it. So it's important when we do work with children and languages to use different words for the same um, task or same, different terminology. I hope that was helpful.
I'm sure it was. Question from Rebecca. What about with PDA when giving them choices is a
Is a
trigger?
trigger.
They cannot handle meeting the demand of choosing 12-year-old ADHD PDA.
Yeah, that's actually why I generally do not use choices as a demand, or if they are choices, they're very visual choices. For instance, if like in the bathtub, having like three different shampoo options where it's not something where it's which one do you want? Because if it's verbalized, it's more of a demand because one of the most important things to remember is that you as a parent are the ultimate demand. So I'm trying to find your question again because I want to make sure I answer it. So giving them choices is a trigger. Yeah, I wouldn't. I would try to avoid and use other kinds of things. It's really important to understand equalizing behaviors, because you're probably experiencing that quite a bit. But I would try to avoid then the choices. And you're going to come to know your child best and what they do. For instance, one of the things I was working with someone recently is food. Food is a huge thing, because getting food is a demand, but then also being provided food is a demand. So there's times when I recommended like ridiculously small portions so that they didn't feel like they had to eat all this food. It's just like little thing, like a little bit. But then, that could feel like a demand, and it's because then they feel like they have to ask for more. So then so you're going to know your child best, but no, absolutely, try to I would just try to avoid it. And if it is something where choices are necessary, make it more visual so that it's not but again, you may have already tried this, but make it like a visual thing where they can just choose, or unless it's where they're sitting, because some people have a really difficult time where the anxiety and they sit there and they have to contemplate like every single choice and go through that. And then you're gonna want to obviously do something different. So unless that's the case, I would just do visual. But if they're overwhelmed with choices, are you able to just provide something? And of course, that's going to vary based on what the choices are, if that makes sense. Like I'm using the shampoo, for example. So instead of having, going over, if they're going over like the three choices of shampoo and oh, I can't, just have the one. Does that help? Or is that going to just be more challenging? Does that make sense? Sorry, I'm trying to add something, but I also realize that each of us are so different that we have to there's so many different nuances. Let me know if you need anything more specific, though.
I'm going back to Melinda, Nathan. How do we control online stuff to special needs kids, like online games or learning apps?
There is someone who does online stuff. I'm going to be completely honest with you. A lot of that stuff, it concerns me a little bit because it's really difficult, and my way is not ideal. Mine is, I have 5-year-old twins. Mine is to keep them away from it as much as possible. But at the same time, we live in a society where you cannot do that. A lot of the kids I work with are playing Roblox or Minecraft and stuff like that. And it's almost impossible because that's their socialization. So there's somebody online, and I wish I knew their Instagram who kind of talks about the safety and how to make things safer. But that's what I would do is make it as safe as you can make it. Avoid it if you can. Make it as safe as you can make it. Because again, I think we had talked about how games can be regulating. However, it depends on the game. For instance, like old school Mario. I can play old school Mario for a little bit and it regulates me and I can put it down. I cannot play Sims because I cannot put it down. I know what my limit is. So, see if you can do something where you can kind of supply your child with certain kind of games that you know are like maybe offline. But if you need to do online, look for how the ways to make it parental controls or that you're able to see and have certain things like you can only do it in the living area where we all are. So then you can go back and forth. Because I know that there's a lot of safety concern when it comes to a lot of the online games. So that would be my thing. If you're able to keep it off and find alternatives, great. If not, make it so that you can have it as secure as possible, and then also make it so that it's where, it's here and explain the why. Again, it's so important, and that's like, explain the why of why you want them in here and why to do it instead of just saying, no, you have to be here. Explain why so that they get it.
Thank you. Question from Susanna. Hello, how to work with my 6 years old son that seems to be ADHD like his father. My biggest problem is to find a way how to motivate him for some boring stuff, from brushing teeth, tidying the room, to learning how to read and write.
A few things that I would recommend is side by side, working side by side, either on tasks. Like for instance, if we need to clean the bathroom, how about they kind of pick what they want to do. Like, oh, I'm gonna clean the sink. All right, cool. I will clean the toilet. Side by side work, trade-off work. I they're supposed to do something, say, hey, I need to do this. Do you want to trade? Like some kind of a trade-off work so that it makes it a little bit easier. I'm trying to think of brushing teeth is so hard. Nuances, especially because you have ADHD, nuances because and think outside of the norm. Think outside the norm. We get so caught up, like for instance, brushing your teeth. I shared a reel about this a while, like a year or so ago. Think outside of the norm. You think brushing your teeth, you think toothpaste and a toothbrush, right? Yeah, different cultures have different stuff. There's a special stick that you can chew on in Africa, and it's really popular, and it cleans your teeth. And I'm gonna tell you, some people will say, "Oh, that's not good enough," or "Oh, someone will find some kind of a complaint." Okay, because like sunblock, and I discovered like these certain wipes and a powder I can use, and someone will say, "Oh, that's not good enough," or whatever. It sometimes it comes down to, do you want anything done or nothing? Like something is better than nothing. So think outside the norms for things like that. And like other things, like I'm gonna share what I do for myself. Like like the nuances is great, but also like there are certain times that some of us are able to do a demand easier than another. Like for instance, if they go to school and they come home and they have that downtime, after having some downtime and are able to regulate, they might be able to do certain demands. That's when I would change my clothes for the next day. Things like that, learning how to read and write. Like I explained, there's so many, I don't know if you caught it a second ago about there being lots of little demands in a task. So try to make it as accessible as possible. For instance, the table. I just put out new nuanced stuff and I have it on the table. And it's just right there. So then they just pass by it, and then sometimes it looks interesting and they sit down and do it, and then sometimes it doesn't. And that has helped great. Or when I'm writing, having something, right on top, and they get interested and want to do the same thing. And that's how I personally do it, and what has helped me and my own children. And I'm hoping that that helps you as well. And games. I am going to say games because of the nuance aspect.
Thank you. Question. I don't know which one to choose, but I will go from the last one. From Ruth, in our 1 to 3 Montessori group, we have almost 3-year-old child who often has a meltdown at certain events, and not always in the same situations. It's very difficult to predict. Examples: in the morning when I arrive in the environment, I greet him, I smile at him, and he makes a silly expression on his face, looks away, pushes the plate away from him, flips the chair.
Ah, that's equalizing behavior.
When the parents arrive at the kindergarten, he starts kicking, hiding, screaming. He doesn't want to go home. Before that, he was fine. Last week, he weed during sleep. Knowing how quickly he can lose himself, I kindly hugged him, put in his hands his spare clothes. He seemed fine, but on the way to the bathroom, he instantly turns and throws his clothes on the floor. There are a lot of situations we can't predict and we don't know how he is going to react. Any suggestions on what we can do?
First, I want to explain what is happening here. So what is happening is equalizing behavior. And the way I always describe it is equalizing behavior. Say you have a scale. You make a demand, or there's something requested, or there's something that shows, because another thing is that a lot of people don't realize is that you are not necessarily seen as an authoritative figure. You're like a peer. We don't see you, you're a peer. And so you have a scale. You have made a demand or have put yourself in a position that you are of power. He needs to equalize that. And in doing so, it's not a slight adjustment. And the reason for this is the nervous system has gone fight, flight, or freeze. And what happens when a person is drowning? They are not calm. They don't say, "Hey, can you toss me a rope?" They are losing it. They're flipping out. They're trying to grab everything. They're screaming. They're not in a state to be nice and calm. And that's the same thing a lot of times with the nervous system when it comes to equalizing behavior. So I'm going to try to talk a little bit slower. To equalizing behavior is in an attempt to even the scale, we even try to even the scale. We make huge adjustments and do things. So that is exactly what this little guy is doing. Um, sorry, I don't know if it's a little boy or not. Sorry. And yeah, he's just yes, he just is doing all these things to equalizing. Sorry, I find this personally enjoy. I love when little ones do equalizing behavior because it's so clear to me that something is off, and I can read that so well. It's like, oh, little one, you're having a really difficult time here. Let's try to adjust this. Um, so one of the ways that you can handle this is humor. And it seems like he might be able to do it. So next time that he smiles at you and makes a silly expression, make a silly expression back to him. I'm curious as what it'll be. Or ask him if he wants to hear a joke. Or do something that to do something like that. When it's time to go away, like when the parents arrive and he starts kicking and screaming, he doesn't want to go. Is there something to look forward to the next time? Or is there like an explanation of, ooh, I can't wait to see you tomorrow. But in order for tomorrow to come, we have to go home and go to bed. Something like that. Explain why is reason, give something else to look forward to the next day. Let him feel in control. Or, hey, when you come tomorrow, I'm going to need assistance. I don't know if you want to help me. You don't have to help me, but I need assistance. Can you, if you want to help me do, make up something like clear off the board or I always clear off the board, but you can do something where they feel important. They feel like they are an equal to you. And yeah, it sounds like the last one, he needs that sense of control because there's safety and control. Even though it might be uncomfortable, there's safety in that control. I don't know if any of that helped, but I hope that was helpful in understanding why he's doing stuff, and hopefully that gives you an idea and things that you can start to implement that you might notice a little bit of a difference.
Next question from Rita Pereira. So, in conclusion, educating with Montessori, is there any important difference in using it with neurotypical children or with neurodivergent? Or there is no significant difference since Montessori is already child-led?
I love this question, and I'm going to tell you a story. When I was pregnant with my twins, they believed that one of them had Down syndrome. And I don't know if you know, but like when they suspect something like that, they want to do all these different things. And I felt so lucky to be pregnant with and everything that I was like, no, 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 don't do anything. Everything's fine because I do Montessori and everything's fine. Like, we're gonna follow their lead. If there's any challenges that they have, it's gonna be met because this is why I love Montessori. I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna let you guys in on something, and I'm gonna be completely honest. I started Montessori with my nephew. And I didn't start it for him, I started it for me as an autistic person because there's such a sense of calm. There's order, there's structure, there's calmness, there's follow and then as I got more into it, it's like, oh, it's following the child, it's meeting all his needs and it's doing it really is. And if you aren't familiar, Maria Montessori began her children's house with children who were unteachable in mind. They were poor and disabled children, and that's how it began. She truly began Montessori with people like me in mind, like autistic children like myself or ADHDers, or because the way it's set up is so perfect. And the problem is, and you're going to hear this a lot, unfortunately, and the problem is that you get a lot of Montessori that truly don't follow her. And it's easy, it's not a trademark name. They can slap the name on anything and throw it out there. And you'll get people you'll I hear all the time. I just had somebody who sending a child to a Montessori school and they wouldn't allow them to use an AAC device. Like, can you imagine Maria Montessori? Like she I oh. But anywho, so no, I truly, it is absolutely, we had done a live not a live presentation, but one of my first year speech here was why Montessori is for autistic children. And I cannot recommend it enough for neurodivergent children. And it is truly because like you said, like you said, it's following the child, it's child-led, and you meet the child where they are at, not where they're supposed to be. You allow them to lead. And it's not, again, when we say child-led or following the child, it's not following the child into a road. Okay. You have boundaries. You have these boundaries, but you can follow them and meet their needs. Like I said, that's one of the reasons we unschool is because it allows me to meet those needs and follow their needs and take and make it in a way that they can learn. And I love that I love Montessori and I cannot recommend it for neurodivergent. Again, it's not for everyone, but it kind of really is for everyone. It really is for everyone because of the main principles.
Thank you. I have last question. It's from Chris.
Okay,
One
let
of
me.
our observers commented, my little is the most proprioceptive seeking they have ever seen, 2.5 years old. What might this be? As well, they seldom use a toy or a game as it's designed, but love to bundle and make still alive arrangements around the house. I make nice party, etc.
Okay, I myself have proprioception challenges. I burn myself a lot and bump into things a lot. Do they have, I don't know if you can answer or if this
It,
is a thing.
there, it should be fine.
Do they have proprioception challenges or it looks like it's just seeking? Oh yeah, just the need so with proprioception for those who don't understand, it's pretty much knowing where your body is and where your body is. For instance, like me myself, I with shoes, I wear sandals so that I can hold my toes over so I can feel when it hits because otherwise I am drag my feet because my body doesn't know when to lift up. When I go to put something in the oven, I'm constantly burning myself. They have these awesome blister patches, by the way. I'm constantly burning myself because I can't tell where my body is in the thing or hitting things. So that's what proprioception is the ability to tell where you are in your body and in your body in relation to other things. Yes, so I imagine that they carry things around all the time. That's kind of why I made sure to play with mine before, but I keep a little thing that I carry. Um, but they use a toy or game as intended. Give them time. Give them some time because a lot of that is 2.5-year-olds not using a toy or game as necessary because and especially it doesn't say if your child's neurodivergent or whatever, but for all children, especially sometimes you have to understand one aspect of it before the other. Like for instance, my little guy's into the ball drop, and the ball is really important for a long time, and they have to, get to understand that and experience that. And then it's like, okay, now let's make the connection of it together. So give it some time. So give it some time to use the things as designed, but also like appreciate how your little one is choosing to use it because usually it's still meeting a need of theirs even though it doesn't look like they're using it appropriate, they are for them, and that's still important. But I hope I answered that. I hope I answered your whole question. Sorry, I was trying to read. Yeah, it looks like they're playing like a pretend game, like they're playing pretend, But yeah, it sounds like they're using it appropriately for them, and they might go and use it for what it's intended to use, but right now they're using it appropriately for them.
Thank you. Amorette, thank you for making the time and thank you for being here with us. Yeah, thank you for all your answers. I was reading the chat and there are so many people who found it helpful. I will copy the chat to you so you have it.
And feel free to reach out to me on Instagram if anybody needs anything or whatever. Thank
And
you
I
so
wanted
much
to
for
ask
having
you,
me.
and I actually wanted to ask you, maybe you can tell everyone, at what Instagram they can find you or website or wherever
Oh
they
yeah,
everyone can find you. So we mention it here. Someone was actually asking for it in the chat as well.
I will. I will type it. Hopefully I know how to do that. So I'm at french.family.montessori on Instagram. And I'm trying to do, like the blue sky or whatever, but I am the most technology in advanced person you have. I always tease and say I'm a defective autistic because I do not do the technology. But thank you so much for having me again.
You're very much welcome. It's always a pleasure, and really thank you a lot for being here. I
Thank you.
also want to thank everyone who came and who asked wonderful questions. Thank you for being here. If there is anyone who is still interested in our next live talk, it's going to be about software systems for schools and programs. So maybe not for the parents, but if there is someone who is interested, we are starting in 28 minutes. Maybe I will see you. If not, then thank you so much for being here. This is the last, almost last talk of the conference. So thank you for being here with me here every day, which is amazing. I really see so many people coming every day and being active, asking questions. So that's wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I will be here reading your chat and answering any questions. If they are here, I will stay for 3, 4, 5 minutes. I will just turn off my camera and microphone. And Amore, thank you again for making the time and thanks.
Thank you.
And bye to everyone.